Hey everyone, it is officially summertime, and that means time for a little bit more 70s soul. It has been 2 years almost since the last video, but in that time it feels like the gods of pop have been paying attention and taking notes because we've got Silk Sonic, Leon Bridges, John Batiste bringing it back. We've got the glorified rhythm section with bands like Bad Bad Not Good, Khruangbin, Wolfpack, bringing back a bit of that tight groove into the mainstream, which is nice. There's a lot of reasons for nostalgia music to be back in style. Obviously, people are wishing for those simpler times when the world wasn't so complicated. We've got the younglings of TikTok, myself included, who have just realized that music existed before we were born. Crazy. Also, it seems like the genre of soulful, easy listening plays perfectly into that Spotify empire of numbing chillness. There are ups and downs to all of this. But what excites me as a songwriter is that to replicate this era of 70s soul, there's a lot of careful choices being made in the arranging and melodies of a song. There's a real beauty to disguising all of that sophisticated music stuff in a tasty little bite-sized pop song. And so speaking of disguises, I am going to be going through some of that craftiness with a song that I put out earlier this year called Disguise. If you want to write like the greats, it's cool to learn all the chords they're playing, but better to pay attention to the way that they're stringing them together. I talked a little bit about those jazzy chords in the last video, and that's good just to give a little bit more emotional depth to your melodies. You know, we're not just happy, we're not just sad, we're somewhere in between, and we're going to take you on a little journey with us, right? There's this gorgeous song from 1974 called Feel Like Making Love, which is performed by Roberta Flack, the Queen, and written by this guy, Gene McDaniels. It goes a little bit like, strolling in the park, watching winter turn to spring, walking in the dark and seeing lovers do their thing. That's the time I feel like making love to you. That's the time I feel like making dreams come true. Oh baby. And this is a lovely little lesson in voice leading. We're in the key of E flat major here, so these are the typical chords we might use. Right, and so somewhere along the way, Gene decides he wants the third to be the note that relates all of the chords he's using. A lot of composers will do this where they'll have one voice in the chord that has like as simple a melody as possible. So he wants G in as many of the chords as possible, so he's going to adjust the chords to highlight that one note. So normally it might go something like, strolling in the park, watching winter turn to spring. But he wants that G in there, so he's going to adjust the chords and go, strolling in the park, watching winter turn to spring. And then it's the same thing in the chorus. There, that's the time I feel like making love to you. So sometimes all it takes to spice up your chord progression is choosing one note to try to include in all of those chords. All this is really doing is building melodies on top of each other, and that's just going to help later on when you're in the arranging stage and you're adding more on top of it. So we've got this underlying melody in the chords to sort of guide the way. And what Gene chooses to do is to follow that melody in the vocal as well. So you've got Roberta singing a melody that keeps landing on G because it sounds great. That note right there. So it's like that. Strolling in the park, watching winter turn to spring. But another thing you could do is choose any other note to revolve around for the vocal melody. What I mean is you could have your chords following the third, but then your vocal melody revolving around the second or the fifth or the sixth. It's really whatever sounds good to you. In my song Disguise, I have the chorus melody always following the second, which is E flat. We're in the key of D. The chords are all following the third, right? So you get that. And then the melody is going to be around the second, that E flat. So, and when you put that all together, it gets this really cool layering effect of melodies that sounds like really buttery. So it's that. And that's when I put on my disguise. It's alright, it's alright. I love good mornings, hate short goodbyes, but I hide the feeling inside. And that's when I put on my disguise. It's alright, it's alright. The arrangement is the part where all of the instruments fit in. This is where you have other little hooks and counter melodies to fill in the spots just to make sure every part of the song is catchy. I like to think of a counter melody as the part that you could teach to a crowd right before you sing your song. You know, something you could sing to anyone and they could sing it right back to you. So for Disguise, I have this little da 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 da, and I figured it would be best to have horns on this because they're the most soulful instrument after the voice, maybe. Arrangement is also the part where you decide more about the structure of your song. Where do the instruments build? Where do they cut out? What's the main climax of the song? This is just as important as how the melody builds over time. Finally, we wouldn't be talking soul if we weren't talking about the groove. The best part of this 70s sound coming back onto the charts is the fact that a lot of this music is played by real people, feeding off each other and their energy in a room somewhere. It's sort of unexplainable why music feels better when it's played live in collaboration, but some things are better off just remaining magic and don't need explaining. It's impossible to mention Feel Like Making Love without bringing up D'Angelo, who is the master of disguising genius with sexiness. And if that's not a rock star, then I don't know what is. So D'Angelo revamps this song in the year 2000. He spices up the groove a little bit. Hip-hop is obviously taking over. There's this producer out of Detroit who has this whole new relationship to musical time. And he's programming his drum machine in a way that's not quite straight, it's not quite swung, it's a little wonky. It's Dilla time. And D'Angelo hears this and says, oh cool, I'm gonna get a real drummer to play like this guy's drum machine and get him on. And a bunch of people say, oh, why would you ever do that? But there's this one guy who gets it, and he really gets it. And now, this Gene McDaniel song is brought into the new millennium in a really cool way. I heard about all of this in an interview with Questlove, and it's such a wild story. I recommend you check out this episode of one of my favorite podcasts. But anyway, I was so inspired by this story, I wanted to try both of these grooves in a song somewhere. So in Disguise, we start out in this more like straight and simple groove, and then at the end it gets more into the like Dilla time kind of thing. And the beat switch up is one of the most, I don't know, trendy things of the past 5 years in pop music. So just in one song, we're tying the 70s to the late 90s to the 2020s. That's what it's all about. I wrote the lyrics to the song with a good friend of mine named Lily, who I think has a voice that rivals Roberta, but you can go ahead and see for yourself and stream it wherever you like.